Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Roshanek, and good morning, Dr. Jude.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Mindset, Heartset, Reset, our dynamic live weekly show that provokes introspection, cultivates compassion, and sparks positive change. We are so excited to have you join us here in our third of this series on indigenous wisdom and culture. We're super excited to bring you this show in particular, this program, because at a time like this, what we really need is to be able to connect to our heart sets, to really see where we're coming from in our mindset, and then get the courage to hit the reset button on our lives. The mission of this show is to expand love on a global scale and to create a world in which all can thrive. Welcome, everybody. I am your host, Dr. Roshanek Hashemian, and I am joined by the beautiful and wonderful Jacqueline Way. I am a computational clinical and behavioral neuroscientist. I forgot for a second. I'm also jet lagged. I'm a human being and I'm jet lagged. I'm a scientific consultant and transformational advisor. And as a highly trained academic, I combine the power of modern science with emotional and spiritual intelligence to create really innovative strategies for us to become more prosperous, more purposeful, more innovative, and really for each of us to optimize for our own lives and to live the best lives that we can. And while doing so, create a world in which all can thrive. And I'm here, as I said, with Jacqueline Way. She is a dedicated world changer, serving humanity with love every day. Her sole purpose is to teach, inspire, and empower the hearts and minds of people globally to create create a happy and meaningful life and world together. She expresses her purpose through her global giving movement, 365 Give. It's wonderful. Check it out. It's a beautiful nonprofit, 365give.ca. The charitable organization was created with her then 3-year-old son with a simple vision to change the world one give, one day at a time. She is a world-renowned keynote speaker with one of the most watched TEDx talks, How to Be Happy Every Day. It Will Change the World. She's committed to living the highest expression of who she is through her work, family, and by touching the lives of others. Over to you, wonderful Jacqueline.
Good morning. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's so nice to be here with everyone today. Starting to feel like home every week in the show. So we're so excited. And this week, I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. We've now had the opportunity to have some time with Dr. Jude Currivan. And I now officially call her Dr. Jude. It's my new nickname for you, Dr. Jude. Dr. Jude, there's lots of things I'm going to share with you about Dr. Jude, but one of the things I really wanted to share with you that we've gotten to experience firsthand is the beautiful light that she is in this world. And she expresses herself in so many ways, but she's taken her knowledge and her experience and most of all her knowing, and she shares it out into the world in her own unique ways. So Dr. Jude is a cosmologist, even a word I can't get out of my mouth.
One day.
A cosmologist.
Exactly.
A planetary healer, a futurist, which we need so much of that right now, and the author of this is just the beginning of this. Listen to what she's an author of: The Story of Gaia, Hope, Cosmos, the Cosmos Hologram, the 8th Chakra, and just to top it off, because that's not enough yet, she is also the co-founder of the Whole World View. Her work is aimed at enabling transformation and resolutions in our collective planetary issues, raising awareness and empowering fundamental change and sustainable solutions to our biggest global problems. Absolutely unbelievable. So Dr. Jude, thank you so much for being with us yet again. We're so excited to have you with us. So today's show, which we also obviously want to introduce to you as well today, is as Dr. Roshanek had said, this is the third of our Indigenous series that we're diving into today. And this show's a little different because this is where Indigenous wisdom will really meet science. And this is where Dr. Jude's expertise lies for us. And this episode is really meant and designed to resonate with your true self by bringing together the infinite, the historic, and the sacredness of our present path. And we're going to reveal timeless truths about being. not only being in the past, but our own being today. Because the evidence shows is what our hearts know is that ultimately humans are good. And that's what I know for sure as well. And that we care for each other and that we come from that place of love. So Dr. Jude, I'm so excited to have you to the show today. Welcome. And we have you from all different corners of the planet. I feel like we have a global family here today.
We do. It's wonderful to be with you both. And thank you again for the invite. And what a beautiful theme, sacred harmony, the symphonic expression of being. I'm so excited for us to explore with everyone together and hope we can really bring in this sense of the sacred and how it can literally frame our lives, be our lives. So looking forward to this so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you here, and you are absolutely the perfect person to round out what we've been discussing in our last shows. So in our first show on the indigenous series, we were discussing the continuum of life. Mm-hmm. We actually launched, our hard launch was on October 31st, which in the US is Halloween. And we decided, instead of going with the spooky Halloween theme, we wanted to discuss Dia de los Muertos, which is a day in which we celebrate our loved ones who have passed away. Mm-hmm. And we discussed the continuum of life with Jose Hernandez, who had had a near-death experience and had changed from a staunch atheist to a spiritual teacher, and from an electrical engineer to an artist. And we had Dr. Anita Sanchez, absolutely, because when you see the light, when you see the truth, it fundamentally changes you. And with you, we're going to come full circle, but we're not ending where we started. We're in a full circle place, but as transformed beings, understanding from our history and our journey what we needed to learn. So this is going to be hopefully the objective of the show. So in Dr. Anita Sanchez, the author of Sacred Gifts, and indigenous Nahua, and they're the nation who introduced us to Dia de los Muertos, spoke beautifully also of the indigenous wisdom that brings us into this being. So the whole show was about this very thin veil that separates our different dimensions of being. And then we had Kevin Martin with us, who is from the Assiniboine nation. He is Dakota, and he shared with us beautiful and very practical indigenous wisdom about what has happened to the more modern indigenous, and what is the wisdom, their edict of speaking for all that cannot speak, for all that flies above and crawls below, and the spiritual truth that guided them through connecting on that level with all other beings, having respect for the beginning, that we didn't just appear here out of nowhere, and the connection that we have, and how that affects our mental health, and how removing the spirituality of the beautiful wisdom that presents itself as rituals, when that's removed and cartoonized by others who come in who don't understand, or who will impose their own narratives, how that separation separates us from our true nature and causes us our problems. We see this practically, individually, and globally. Now we come to you, and we go back historically. Now, Dr. Jude has a master's in physics and a PhD in anthropology, and she's a cosmologist, amongst other things. And so you are very truly amongst other
amongst
things.
Light and love and all those other good things.
Right. And being the UK's premier businesswoman and so on and so forth. But you not only have studied the history of the universe and of us, anthropology, but you also live this truth of being, this sacred harmony of being. And so I would like to come to you, given this beautiful background and what you are uniquely positioned to discuss. I would like us to now, moving forward, to go backward. The natural continuum of our conversation in this series would lead us to our native states of being and functioning. Can you please speak to how we as human beings have behaved historically? I mean, going back tens of thousands of years, not just a little while. How did we behave with respect to each other, and that behavior leading to our human flourishing?
Well, let's not just go back a few thousand or 10,000 years. Let's go back
Okay.
6.5 million years, shall we?
Oh, well, all right. See, she's always there. She's one step ahead.
Right.
Yes.
Time, space, reality. Just
Let's go back
Just for fun.
away. Let's go back away. Because
Go big or go home.
around 6.5 million years ago, our earliest homonym ancestors evolved. And for the first time, that line separated from what we know now as the great apes and the chimpanzees. And they came down from the trees of Africa. All the other primates kept in the forests, but our hominin, earliest ancestors, came down from the trees. Now, why this is so significant that they began to walk upright is that the males and the females of the species were the same size. Whereas we see now primates, the male is usually much bigger teeth, more of a harem instead of a sort of a family. Whereas when we came into that evolutionary journey, the evidence is growing that for the first time we formed bonded pairs of male and female. And those bonded pairs were then able to have a level of complementarity and form small family bonds. And so I describe this as we were born for love. That journey where we moved away from the great apes and their social structures moved us down a line of relationship, of deeper relationship between males and females, between parents and children, and into more of families where the families would have experienced, and quite early on in that process, we also see the development of language. So we're enriching that journey as we go forward. And so when we come to, several 100,000 years ago, the homonyms with which there are a whole raft of them, Neanderthals, Denisovans, all of them, we're finding the evidence that they also cared after the vulnerable in their societies, not just the children and the older people, but also those who'd perhaps had an accident and broken legs and couldn't hunt or forage. They were looking after the vulnerable of their societies. And the other thing that we see is that they revered they revered the dead. There was the sense of that continuation of consciousness beyond the veil that you were speaking of earlier. We found graves where there had been offerings of flowers very early on, and not just in modern humans, but going back to Neanderthals. And in the caves now more recently in South Africa, we've discovered a species that is smaller than us, but clearly in communities that are closer to us than the hundreds of thousands of years that separate us would suggest. So we've got a long, long journey. We're now, after that huge span of time, the only species of hominins left walking our beloved Earth. But we have a long history of that reverence, that care, that compassion, that social bonding for each other. And of course, when more recently we go back into the past, we have now the understanding both from indigenous communities, but also, as you mentioned, ancient traditions that saw the world as sacred, that saw our relationship with the great web of life as sacred, which recognized that not just biological organisms are sentient, but our entire planet and our entire universe is essentially living and sentient. So when, indigenous teachings talk of all our relations, they're talking about the standing people, the plants, the trees. They're talking about, Papa Inti and Pachamama, Father Sun, Mother Earth, all the way through those traditions. There's this realization that we are inseparable from that living and essentially loving web of life. And what we now have a realization, of course, is that these aren't just cycles of life, which are traditional. We are here 13.8 billion years after the beginning of our universe, which has embodied an evolutionary impulse to this point. So for me, that is a sacred journey. And therefore, it's not a cycle, but it's a spiral of ever increasing complexity and self-awareness and individuation. And that is our heritage. That is our story. That is our life journey as microcosms of a living universe to this point. And this is a sacred journey.
Beautiful.
Well, I think that covers it. We can go.
Tea time.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for having me. We need nothing else. That was perfect.
We have so much more of this amazingness. Are you kidding? Come on, Jacqueline, over to you.
Yeah, I'm all in on this one. You know, one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past, and I wanted to, you know, you gave us such a beautiful overview just now of this continuum, right from where we started all the way through the beautiful common threads that I could hear in the story of humanity from where we came from and where we are today. I think we've lost a little bit of that
Sure.
connectedness these days. I think that we've lost that sense of love and community, even though we're probably more connected now in our world than we ever have been before. We know that people feel so alone and people feel disconnected, not only from each other, which you just expressed to us, you know, that started right back before when we started as two-legged creatures standing up and beginning that journey. It was in community that we thrived. We've heard this a lot through the indigenous wisdoms that we've been listening to over the last few episodes, but you have a knowledge that few people do in your work, and that carries through so many different indigenous traditions across the globe, literally.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about some of what you've learned, some of those, I like to call them that common thread, because we're going to talk more about the web of life too. And I think the common thread starts to help people understand how it ties into this web of life as well. When we start to see that it doesn't matter if you live in Africa, if you're an indigenous tribe in Africa, or if you were an indigenous tribe in North America, or somewhere in the islands, wherever that was in different regions of the world, when we didn't have a cell phone that let us all know how it worked. But yet there were still these common threads that we see and hear, and how can we take those? How can you teach us about those? And how can we start to bring those into where we are in the world today to bring us back together into a sense of global community, that we're not so different and that we're actually far more the same than we realize?
Absolutely, Jacqueline. I'd like to, again, maybe consider this in three ways, because when I have journeyed around the world, and I've had the privilege of journeying to more than 80 countries. So, and in those journeyings, I've had the great honor and privilege of being with, you know, modern day living indigenous communities from Alaska and Hawaii to South America to India to Australasia and beyond. And so there's a thread that goes through that commonality, which quite often incorporates what I call the shamanic path. And yet when I go further back, I also see in my studies and my research in terms of ancient Egypt, ancient India, China, etc., a different emphasis, which I call the way of the sage. And then what we see, certainly in the last 2,500, 3,000 years, we see a different perception, which actually comes from revelatory experience. I call that the way of the seer. So if we look at the whole of our human journeys, there have been sort of emphases or lived expressions and experiences that have tended to sort of coalesce around those three emphases: the sage, the shaman, and the seer. And the way and all are indigenous, all have emerged from a sort of an experiential, lived sense of place, of time and of space. So if we go really as far back as we have any sense of, this is before writing, this is before history as such, then what was the common, what was the lived experience, as far as we can have any sense of, for the whole of humanity? And that was shamanic. That was a perception that we are inseparable members of the web of life, that all is sacred. And some of the key aspects of that is a perception that we are not above any other members. We are all relations in this family of life. And those relations are also mountains and rivers and rocks and sun and moon and stars. But we are part of it. We're embedded within it. We're not above it in any way. And for me, the other really key aspect of that shamanic relationship is reciprocity. In Quechua, in the Quero language of Peru, it's Ayni, A-Y-N-I. And it's not transactional. It's a love, a gratitude, a joy that naturally has that balance of giving and receiving in every aspect of life. You know, if someone has a drink, they'll pour a little bit back to Pachamama. You know, it's that love and that, again, that community, but that community of all life. And it's lived in the heart. It's lived in the heart. And it doesn't, it also, its perspective is of space and time, that it isn't linear in that sense, that there are these cycles that imbue the sacredness of space and time, the journeying of the year, the way that the sun rises and sets, the moon rises and sets, different stars rise and sets. I mean, the shamanic tradition in Peru actually knows when to plant the crops, depending on how bright the Pleiades are, the stars of the Pleiades are in the sky. Now, they didn't study science, but they knew that if the stars were brighter or less bright, it was a guide as to when to plant their crops. And we now know it's because of the high level atmospherics that are part of either an El Nino or a La Nina weather system. So it was a guide as to whether it was going to be rainier or less rainy, or hotter or less hot. But all of these, and my, community engagements, especially with Australian Aboriginals, that depth of relationship with the natural, we call the natural world, but the web of life, enables such profound intuitive wisdom. An anthropologist went to the Amazon to choose plants for medicines, and they came across the encyclopedic knowledge of the Amazonian shamans and said, how did you find all this out? And they said, the plants told us. The plants told us. That is how I would sort of, embrace this wisdom, which is within us all. We all have intuition as our superpower, but we all can enter a deeper relationship with Gaia and learn from, be the students of, because that's how the shamanic traditions always see themselves. They are students and relations in this great web of life. Now that's the heart. We can come back to the sage and the seer, because those two are key. They're part of a three-way now, I believe, interweaving of head and heart and purpose. And the sage is the way of the head. And those traditions have followed an understanding of harmony, of resonance, of relationships, of sacred geometry, of music. All of those based on the primacy of number. And again, relationships, but perceived in a different way. And then the seers, it's the revelation. It's the revelations that gave rise to, the religious teachings. the spiritual teachings of the last 2,000 years. They were received, they were revelatory, often not particularly wanted. Often, I don't want this. Do I really want this? But with that courage to say, yes, this is coming through me, and this enables me to serve. So for me now, this is all indigenous. We are all indigenous. We all have access to this depth and breadth of wisdom. So for all of us, perhaps the invitation is, what is it that resonates with you? Is it a shamanic path? Is it the way of the sage? It is the way of the seer? Or is it all three that can be interwoven and integrated to a profound lived experience of what it means to be inseparable from a living, loving, evolutionary universe?
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That is so beautiful. Jacqueline, would you like to?
Well, I just, you know what? I know we're both gonna have questions coming from this. And as you were sitting, speaking, I was thinking, we're so stuck in our heads these days.
Yeah.
People are just stuck in our internal chatter and what the world keeps, throwing at us from the outside, and we're internalizing and holding on to. But yet your wisdom is telling us that, we can come from that shamanic place, but in a different way.
Yeah.
How can we just help people create this understanding? Because as soon as you said, you can come from your head from the shamanic perspective. And I think, that's where I think life is, or the world has taken us all down a dark path these days, is that we are living from our head and not from our heart. How can we bring some of that a little bit more into the real life today to go, okay, how do I shift from the shamanic mind out of my incessant chattery mind that tends to take me down a drain hole most days?
Well,
just speaking the truth, right?
There's a few things. One thing I've learned, I've learned many, many, many things from, the shamanic communities, the indigenous shamanic communities that I've had the honor of being with. First of all, they're very present. They don't live their lives in the past or the future. They live it very present in the here and the now. And that is so wonderful, because when we take a breath and go, here and now, we notice more. We have this deeper relationship. We have this more natural easiness to ourselves. I've never seen anyone in a shamanic community rushing around. And I know that one of the shamanic teachers today talks about when the times are urgent, slow down. And that's what those indigenous communities, almost all of whom are modern indigenous communities, are indeed shamanic communities. It's when we go back to more ancient and universal wisdom teachings that we see the sort of the sage coming out in the sacred, music and the sacred geometry and the rest of it. So the living shamanic, the living indigenous communities, there's a sense of presence. Relationship is fundamental. Relationship to oneself, to each other, to the community, to the wider web of life, are all, they're just breathing out into greater circles of compassion. They're not separate in any way. But one of the interesting things that I've come across in such communities is if somebody is behaving badly, there is far less blame than is often the case in our Western societies, where we point blame. There's an appreciation that somehow the community has gone down a wrong path. And so the person who's behaving badly is not scapegoated, is not exiled, unless they really, are in extremis. But there's a bringing together of how can we heal this? How can we resolve this? And the other thing that I find, and this is challenging because I do appreciate just how much trauma so many of our living indigenous communities have been through because of the way that colonialism has has treated them. And I find an incredible heart openingness of forgiveness, of willingness to forgive, a willingness to move forward. And also within the communities themselves, the rituals that you referred to very briefly earlier mark the rites of passage of our lives. And that's something I feel that we really need to regain and remember. This way of honouring the turning of the seasons, honouring births, honouring puberty, honouring marriage, honouring the transition at the end of life. Communities of this type, everyone's included. Everyone's included. And I remember being with an Australian Aboriginal extended family on their sacred land many years ago. And one of their number was dying. And he was involved and included with such love. Such love. And there is the knowingness that when he passed, as there is with every member of that community, that he would go to join the ancestors. His memory would not be lost. He would just transition to being an ancestor. And every way and every day and all those rituals, those ancestors are also very present. So these are some of the things that just, bring people together, hold people in harmony, in community, in health, in profound sense of health, of whole being. And that also brings incredible resilience. When Aboriginals in Australia have been there for probably 60,000 years, millions of folks over 60,000 years in harmony with their environment until, we came along a couple of hundred years ago. And we can remember, not go back to living like this, but certainly remember our relationship and relationships with each other and literally the whole world.
That is beautiful. I would love to follow up. There's so much to, first of all, allow that to sink in and let us process it, but also to which threads of those to pull on a little bit to get even more of that wisdom into our being, because wisdom doesn't come until we take the time to process the information, right? We have to have that experience.
Yeah.
And in this modern world, especially the further west we go, coming all the way over to the US, the more it is that we are in a rush. And I'm from New York. I want it not yesterday, even last week.
Yeah.
There's no time for anything, and we have to rush. And so as you spoke about so beautifully about relationships, so I have at least two questions I'd like to bring up. We are at an all-time high with respect to mental health challenges.
Yeah.
So before the pandemic, we were in a global mental health crisis and it was getting worse. Those of us who are, mental health professionals have known this and been talking about this for a long time. And the pandemic only exacerbated it.
Yeah.
And, the French say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's not like there wasn't stress before. Of course there was. In fact, there was life-threatening stress always. But what you brought up and what is, I believe, our strength, and how you mentioned that we were the only of the surviving hominins, is that we were incredibly deeply interwoven with each other. Not to say, and especially in the US with this hyper individualistic individualism narrative, it's not to say that, and I think it's really important for people to get this, you don't get lost in a sea of nothingness, that everybody is the same when we discuss oneness, when we discuss interdependence, which is how we live. Like it or not, nobody got here on their own. We are not sharks. We're not precocial. We're not born full teeth, ready to hunt the minute we come out of mama. That's not us. Not a single one of us came to this age, whatever age we are, without somebody feeding us, clothing us, sheltering us. So interdependence is how we thrive and how we are created. And you've shown us the reason why we've flourished. And when we collectively understand that we collectively either win or lose, we don't, one person wins, one person loses. Either we all win or we all lose. And I think it's becoming painfully apparent that that's the case. So as we're talking about the importance of human interdependence, love, and much less of a blame and shame culture, because I'm always, Jacqueline, on this, I'm always talking about how, first of all, the most toxic of all emotions, shame, how blame and shame really are our undoing and lead to the tremendous mental health issues that we have, whether it's biologically because of how the body will respond to that, and that's quite scientifically true, or whether it is psychosocially, environmentally, however you want to see it, it's always going to end up at the end with us suffering. And by us, I mean all beings. So you spoke about transactional relationships and how they weren't transactional relationships before. And I find that today, whether we know or not how transactional we're being, and again, these are the overwhelming narratives. And so I think it's so important, if nothing else, that people understand there are other narratives. Absolutely. And just because there is an overwhelming narrative now doesn't mean it is the narrative that serves us best or the truth. And the truth is what we sort of choose to be true, isn't it? And what we make to be true through our behavior. So having said all of that, can you speak a little bit to how we can ensure the flourishing of the present and future generations through this continuing wisdom of altruism, connection, and collaboration versus this barreling down the path that we're going now, apparently, of essentially self-annihilation, self-destruction for sure, at least to some level, if not to its fullness. Because of this competition over collaboration taken to the extreme, because of this individual blame and shame, because we've created such a hierarchy, opposite of what you were saying earlier, that is incongruent and inconsistent with all the rest of nature, basically, and how whether or not we will acknowledge this, that each person is truly powerfully impactful, and that each of us is here because of all the ancestors that came before to give us who we are and what we are today, without which we wouldn't be. So given this collective, given these truths of impact, of collective decision to thrive through altruism and collaboration, what can we do to help ourselves now in this incredible, painful place that I think we are in? I would say unnecessarily, but it depends from which perspective we come. How can we move from that collective decision of we've gone down the wrong path to a collective decision that starts from the individual decision of this is the course correct we need?
Okay. Well, first of all, I wholeheartedly support what you said. Unity is not uniformity. Wholeness is radical diversity. We're each unique. We're each unique expressions. And yet we have a collective experience of what it is to be human, but in greatly ranging different lived experiences. So that's, I think, the first point. You know, this is about enhancing our uniqueness, but also it's a both and, the me and the we and the all. That's the key difference, because the journey that we've been on, certainly in the West, has been on more and more individuation of the me. And so the we, even though the technology is linking us, the level of we-ness in terms of authentic relationships has been reducing. But I'd like to sort of go back a stage, Roshanak and Jacqueline, from what you just said, Roshanak, about narrative. Because we are a story sharing species.
Mm-hmm.
And we've probably told stories around hearths as long as we've been able to speak. Yeah. So our stories are basically on our narratives underpin our stories. And our stories in many ways drive or guide or inform the choices we make and the behaviors that we undertake. And back in the 19th century, the science of the day was of a mechanistic universe, a big clockwork universe. No room for God, no room for heart, no, just mechanistic. Very well done, but very mechanistic. So it was a cosmology, a worldview of separate objects. Now, that was the same time as Darwinian evolution came forward, and it wasn't Darwin's fault, but the followers, the people who came after him, also bought into this mechanistic perception with regard to evolution. In addition, at the same time, there was a lot going on in the sort of mid-late 19th century that set us on this road especially. But this was when the Industrial Revolution really took off in the West. So all the structures of that Industrial Revolution were reflecting the worldview that was essentially the science of the day, of this mechanisms and hierarchies and objects. So we had organizations of hierarchies, we had governance of hierarchies, we educated our children in this way. Our healthcare was came from this same worldview. Now we still have that same worldview. We have a 19th century worldview, or based on 19th century science, 21st century technology, and here we are as a result. So the first thing I feel is really vital is to realize that the narrative we've been telling ourselves of an essentially dead, meaningless, purposeless, accidental universe that doesn't care about us, that's made up of separate objects, is now being turned completely on its head by leading edge science. And the leading edge science at all scales of existence and many different fields of research is now converging with universal wisdom teachings of wholeness, of unity, of the web of life, where life is in our entire universe as well as our planetary home, where evolution is not driven by random occurrences, but meaningfully guided from simplicity to complexity. This is the new and unitive narrative that we can begin to come together to write together now. And it's founded on the evidence. It's founded on the best understanding and scientific breakthroughs we have. But it is also wholly aligned and convergent with indigenous wisdom teachings, universal wisdom teachings, ancient understandings of the symphonic expression of being and of sacred harmony. It is all coming together. So we now have the opportunity as a species to remember that we're inseparable, because our journey, and I'm not describing it as a mistake, I think we needed to go through that level of individuation to this point where we can wake up to remember, yes, we are unique and individuals, and we are inseparable from the overall and wholeness of life. So a lot of our mental disease, it seems to me, is a dis-ease of that illusion of separation. And we're now remembering and realizing and discovering that while reality is real, separation is indeed an illusion.
I love that you brought that into this conversation. I think it's incredibly important for everybody to hear this and over and over and over again.
I was going to say, we need to take that little clip and remind everybody.
Absolutely. So
like a
important.
little GIF, a Dr. Jude GIF on repeat.
I would love to ask you or bring forth the one other aspect of what you've said, and it starts from the beginning, and that is, when Jose Hernandez, our guest a couple of weeks ago, was, as he said, moving on, when he was dying,
Yeah.
having that near-death experience, he said, and he was an electrical engineer, and because his parents were of different religious leanings, I believe his mother's Catholic and his father's indigenous, he really just took a separate way and became a staunch atheist and relied on science for everything. Now, I'm a scientist, you're a scientist. Science is extraordinary and wonderful and incredibly important because it serves us well. And this is, as you were alluding to, this is incredibly important because we wanted to know how the world works so we can make a better world for ourselves.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we did with science. So science to me is so important because it brings what is intractable into tractable. It allows us to use all that is around us, or to interact with it, let me say better, in a way that helps us to function in this incarnation. And so what I mean is, from my perspective, this body, this mortal coil, is an incredibly advanced work of engineering, genius work of engineering, that is for our animus, for our spirit that animates it, to take us where we want to go. And just like looking at the Pleiades and how bright they were, the seven sisters, right?
Yeah.
To tell us when to plant. Science helps us to create, and we are creators. Having said that, Jose said when he was crossing over, science completely fell apart, it unraveled, and he had nothing to hold on to, because all he held on to was science. And so for me and my organization and my raison d'etre, Access to the Path, the two pillars are science and spirituality. And these days people think they're completely separate, but they aren't.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to speak a little bit to the practicality of how science serves us and the way that it dovetails beautifully with spirituality, and how together they create for us this world, this universe that allows all the possibilities for us and the experiences for us and the beauty for us. Because based on what you were saying earlier, the shamanic path, the way of the sage, the way of the seer, all of these were incredibly sensitive to life. So when we speak of life and us being here, could you please speak a little bit to this dovetail of science and spirituality and where that works together here for us?
Be happy to. I mean, what we're discovering, and this is so broad and deep that it's not just, a few pieces of information here or data or a few papers. This is a vast coming together of leading edge science and discoveries and breakthroughs, is a realization that the appearance of our universe, while real, is not its deepest fundamental nature, that the energy and matter and space-time of our universe is an appearance that emerges from deeper levels of cosmic intelligence and sentience, which is exactly how universal wisdom teachings, spiritually based teachings, have shown us. But we now have the evidence, because we're seeing the patterns of meaningful information as all pervasive through the appearance of our world. So we're now realizing that science needs to dig deeper, needs to delve deeper beneath the appearance of energy matter, beneath the appearance and beyond the appearance of space-time. And so it is doing. And when it does that, and it can do that with the technologies we have, because, for example, we can look out into space and we can take satellite images of the whole of space. And we can actually differentiate those images into slightly different temperatures. Yeah. Those different temperatures, minute, are actually radiation left over from a very, very early era of our universe. But as space has expanded and time's flowed since, that radiations continue to fill the whole of space. And we see in those images and those temperature differences exactly the same harmonic patterns and relationships that we see when we look at the way that, for example, river systems behave, the way mountain ranges relate to each other, the way that human collective behaviors play out. Now, these are sometimes called fractals, and they obey something called power laws. They scale up, they scale down, but they are innately relational, and they of themselves emerge from these deeper levels of causation. So what we're doing, we're finding the evidence, and we're finding it at every scale, from the most minute to the whole universe. We're finding it from physics and chemistry and meteorology and sociology and neuroscience, and we're also, realizing absolutely fundamentally that we as a species, in our behaviors, have exactly the same patterns as what we might have hitherto referred to as the natural world. So we see the same patterns in ecosystems as we do in the internet. We see the same relationships between the frequency of an event and the scale of it in earthquakes as we do in human conflicts. And so we also see that underpinning all of this appearance is consciousness. Mind and consciousness aren't what we have. What we're seeing here, and the evidence here is showing us that mind and consciousness is what we and the whole world are. So when we take that in, let it breathe through us, let the universe breathe through us on this incredible evolutionary journey, it gives us, it seems to me, it empowers us, because our universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves, which means that everything in it, including us, is meaningful and purposeful. And, we belong. We belong to our universe. The story of our universe is the story of ours. It's our story. And we have so much more in our expansive potential of consciousness that we've, through all that story that we've been sharing today, we've only just touched the top. It's like the waves on top of the ocean. We have so much potential. If we can wake up to this understanding, come together with a new and unitive narrative, because it is ancient, but the evidence and the science is new. So it is new in that sense. That can underpin and frame us to see the world through a different lens, and in seeing it through a different lens, heal our dis-ease of separation and literally consciously evolve to what we can evolve to become, which I would describe as co-evolutionary partners with our planetary home and our entire universe. This is a big invitation to a great party and a magical adventure.
Who doesn't want to go to a great party?
Exactly.
Come on.
We need a little music. We'll be ready to go.
So beautiful. So
ABBA.
beautiful.
It has to be ABBA.
There we go.
Dr. Rochnacker, are you okay if I touch on the web of life for a minute before this is where I get really excited for people to understand. And this is literally, I want to shed a little light on the topic of the web of life. And this is before, Dr. Jude, I'll let you know that I knew a lot, or I had the understanding of the web of life. And I was sitting at my office desk, where you can all see all this light that comes into my house. I'm blessed with all this beautiful light that comes in. And I was sitting at my office desk one morning, and I have windows right in front of me you can't see. And in a moment of time, some light came in through the windows, and I realized that there was this absolutely stunning spider web that had been created
Mm.
right in the corner of my window. And one moment I couldn't see it at all. I actually happened to see the spider that looked like it was sitting there floating through nothing, just floating in the middle of nowhere, no time, space. It was just floating there. I couldn't see any of that web at all. And then all of a sudden, this beautiful light came shining in through the web. And all of a sudden, I saw the magic.
Oh.
And I saw the beautiful web. I got to see every strain that was connected to another strain. And in between those strains, there were these beautiful little dots all the way around. And it was a large, beautiful spider web. And I'm using this reference for everyone that's listening because it took me a while, and I've been studying this. I was the one that, read Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversation with God, when I was in my early 20s. And it's taken me a long time to take the path to my own understanding about the web of life and being able to shine that light on what you're talking about today, to not only understand it, but to embrace, to live it in full light for myself. And so can you talk to everyone about if we were to take that web, that spider's web analogy, how do we, because that really brought it together for me. It was like an epiphany, a moment of time where I went, oh, that's it. Right? That's it. That's the web of life, the beautiful lines. And I was so excited. I've never let go of that. Can you talk to us about really helping people understand that web that we all live in a tangible way, that not just the science, I'm not as brilliant as you two are. I have my own different brilliance that I need to see the spider's web. Like I need that visual understanding because I don't have the science. And I know a lot of our listeners don't have that science that you two do. Bring it down to earth for me and shine that light so everybody has the understanding.
Well, first of all, I think it's such a beautiful analogy that I would invite everybody to go look at a spider's web. Just sit down. I mean, one of the great initiations of Australian Aboriginal youths when they reach puberty is they go on a vision quest. But the vision quest isn't, miles out.
Mm-hmm.
They literally sit with some shade, but they sit in one place for 24 hours at least, but 24 hours. And the guidance is to actually observe everything that happens just in that tiny little area around them. And that might be a beetle, it might be whatever it might be a spider's web. But that observation, that very presence and that observation, that slowing down and seeing means the world. Because as Roshanak, you were saying, you're from New York, everything's yesterday or the day before. It's when we slow down, when we breathe, we can see much clearer, we can hear much more. So the spider's web, I would invite everyone, when they next see a spider's web, and certainly when the light is, as you described, Jacqueline, so beautifully, and especially if there's a spider there, because if you observe the spider, the web is an extension of the spider. The spider just stays, and sometimes stationary, for a very long time because, to just observe what might come in for dinner. But the point is that if that spider sort of makes a tiny movement, the whole web is affected.
Mhm.
The web and the spider are as one. One tiny movement of the spider, the whole web moves. And that is the web of life. We may not see that incredible silk that connects all the nodes, but it is there because it is consciousness, it is mind, it is the nature of reality itself. So everything we touch, whether it's in thought or feeling or action, we're touching that web of life. So what do we do with what we touch? Do we touch it with love and joy and gratitude? Or do we touch it with fear or hate or scapegoating? Because the web is dynamic, the web is living, the web responds, and we both receive and give that connectivity because we truly are inseparable from its reality. And knowing that and living that, perhaps to invite us to touch the web with lightness and with love.
Beautiful.
Didn't that bring it full circle? Isn't that how I introduced you, as light and love? That was perfect.
I'd forgotten that.
Now everyone gets to see it.
Absolutely beautiful. This has been such
That
an
was perfect.
extraordinary hour. I wish we had another one or two, but we are bringing you back again, Dr.
Oh, yeah,
Jude.
we're not done with you
Currivan.
yet.
We're not done with you yet.
And I wish you could see all the beautiful comments that have been coming through. A flower power, humankind, innovation, change it with compassion. Thank you everyone for all your beautiful comments and for being here. This is my favorite from Wayne. Wayne, if you're still there, and he says, "Hoo-ha!" That was perfect.
No Al Pacino for you there.
Exactly.
And I love whoever said about innovation, because I'm talking about innovation.
Yes.
I'm talking about both outer innovation, but coming from innovation, because then we bring that beingness of love and light and joy into what we innovate. So fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you and everyone.
Well, one last question before you go. Jacqueline, what's our favorite last question?
Oh, okay. So for everybody out there listening, we have our get you off your couch moment. Because what we know is that we all spend a little too much time on our couches, on our phones, flipping through all of the things. So Dr. Jude,
receiving, but not taking action.
we need to. That's what you two beautifully talked about. This is the beautiful mortal coil that we have been given. How do we now go out and experience our true divine selves in the world? What's our get off the couch moment from you today, Dr. Jude? What's your call to action to everyone here today? Say it's time to get off the couch and go to action. Yeah. What's your call to action for the world?
My call to action is do what makes your heart sing.
Mm.
Do what makes your heart sing, because then that song will be the song that touches the web, that resonates with the web, that harmonizes with the web. That is the sacred, that is the symphonic expression of both being and doing.
That's the beautiful symphonic expression. I had to end this. I shared it with Roshanak the other day, and it was a beautiful little one-liner I heard from some really cheesy Christmas Hallmark movie this past week, of all things. But it was beautiful. It said, go out and find, when you want to show someone love, find the song that makes their heart sing and play that. And play that.
Yes.
And that just reminded me of that, is go play that beautiful symphonic harmony that makes other people's hearts sing. And that's what we started with, wasn't it? Is that connection with others, and how do we make each other sing in harmony with each other? That was beautiful, Dr. Jude.
Jason on YouTube says, nice to hear all of your laughter. And you, Dr. Currivan, said, do what makes your heart sing. And laughter is something that we definitely, all of us enjoy and could definitely use more of, much more in the world. And so thank you, Jason, for your comment.
Need language. I've actually laughed so much with folks all over, and we haven't spoken the same language, but we've seen something and we've found it so funny, and we're sort of bent over, we're holding each other up because we're laughing so much.
Okay, so next time, Dr. Jude, when you come, we're going to have a laughter, one of those laughter sessions that they've created in India. We can have a laughter session and a dance party. I think we should just do that next time. What do you think? Yeah, and then that's it. We're going to be playing the harmony for everybody.
There's the symphonic expression of life. Voila.
Exactly. Done. You never know with this show what we're going to bring in, right?
But we know it's always going to be great. Yes. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Jude Currivan, for making the time to come and share your genius, your light, your heart, you with us. It's always just such an extraordinary life nurturing experience. Thank you so much.
Bless you, Roshanak. Bless you,
Thank you.
Jacqueline.
You
Jacqueline,
too.
would you like to tell our audience about next week?
Well, absolutely. And Dr. Jude will love to hear this as well. So we're
Yes.
so excited. And I happened to mention his name just a few minutes ago. And our dear friend, well, we could call him a doctor. Really, he should have his own doctorate at this point. And that is our dear friend, Neil Donald Walsh, world famous author of now his 40th book. A book
Yes.
called God Talk, which literally lands today. Today is the day. We are so excited next week. We have the privilege, if you don't know, and I can't imagine you wouldn't, but if you have not been onto the Humanities Team website, if you're on Facebook
Where have
or
you been?
anywhere else, where have you been? But Neil Donald Walsh is obviously the author of Conversation with God series and a plethora of endless books that will inspire you to live your best life without any doubt and live from your true nature. But we have him here next week, next Tuesday. You need to join us. We get the beautiful opportunity of having an interview and conversation with Neil about God Talk, and we just can't wait. We're so excited to really take a dive into, this is the intuition you were talking about earlier, Dr. Jude,
Absolutely.
where we can really begin to listen. And I think he's the master at one of it. We have the pleasure of working with Neil on a weekly basis on a show on Clubhouse still today, where people get to come and talk with him live every Wednesday on Clubhouse. But to bring him here and bring him back home to Humanities Team and to have those conversations, that's next Tuesday, Heartset, Mindset, Reset. We are inviting you all to come back because we loved having you here, like having everybody in the audience and seeing your comments and your reactions. That just makes every single moment together worthwhile, because now we feel like we have our own family and our own community, and we're excited to build that out with everybody. So thank you, Dr. Jude, for being part of our family. We always feel so connected to you. Dr. Roshanak, my co-host, my soul sister, literally. We couldn't do this without each other. We're that beautiful balance between yin and yang, and it's just magic. And I feel so honored to be doing this with you. So thank you both, and to the whole Humanities team who's behind us, who you can't see, Jim and Garth. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much. And if you haven't been on Humanities,
and Abby and Karen, and there's
oh
a
my God,
whole
it keeps
team.
going. There's a
Andy,
whole team.
yeah.
Yeah. And please go check out, Dr. Jude has actually many shows and masterclasses on Humanities Stream,
Yes.
on the platform. Please go to that platform. You get to hear more and more and more from her. She's just a shining light for Humanities Team and part of our family here. And we're blessed to have you with us.
And if you don't know what Humanities Stream is, for those of you who are on Facebook or YouTube and listening on other platforms, it is basically the Netflix of personal development. You need to at least check it out. It's fantastic. I would love to end, if you don't mind, with something that one of our, there it is, humanitiesstream.net. Check it out. And check out Dr. Jude Currivan on there. She has her own master classes. She's on the Global Oneness Summits. And every time it's something beautiful and different. And as you saw today, deeply resonating. So I highly invite you to check that out. Wholeheartedly invite you. I'd like to end, if it's okay with you, with something that one of our other listeners on YouTube Live has commented. And it's Sakaro Amethyst, 111, 4 ones, and says, with every breath I take, may all beings find peace and love for the highest good of all. And so it is.
There it is.
Thank you for joining us.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste, everybody.